So for our last presentation will be by Nick Ackerley on the field calibration of weak motion seismometers using strong motion accelerometers as reference.
Thank you, Benoit. My name is Nick Ackerley. I work at the Canadian National Data Centre. I'll be presenting some work I did with an undergrad student, Callum Irving. Our work is a little bit like Dominique's. It could be seen as proposing a different transfer standard, but in addition, we're proposing the possibility of calibrating the transfer standard in the field. In any case, we're working towards using these techniques for absolute calibration of the Canadian National Seismograph Network. My knowledge of the current state of the art of absolute seismometer calibration is actually from previous CTBTO S&T conferences. As I understand it, the main struggles in the lab are at the very edges of the passband, and I personally have been taking special interest in the temperature sensitivity of sensors. In fact, there's a very interesting paper on this topic on Thursday from the group at Sandia, Doug Bloomquist, and I think the question of temperature deserves more attention because once that lab-calibrated sensor is deployed in the field for a side-by-side test, the temperature is likely to be different. I'm also wondering about the possibilities of the sensor being damaged in transport. Also, the lab calibration method seems extremely equipment and labor intensive. So I'm going to take a little detour on theory to start. Control systems theory. On the left, there's a very simplified diagram of a feedback control system. The basic idea is that there's a forward path labeled A and a feedback path labeled B. Excuse me. Yeah, on the left. So there's the forward path A and a feedback path B. And a basic property of these systems is that for sufficiently high loop gain, the A times B or beta, the response of the system is determined by the feedback path alone. In a force feedback inertial sensor, an electrical calibration should not change the loop gain, may introduce a low pass filter, and crucially, it injects current into the force transducer. And that on the right-hand diagram, the details of the diagram aren't important, but you can see the IC, a calibration current being injected into the force feedback transducer. And if you follow that current around to what was the input, the ground motion input, and then out to the digitizer, you realize that suddenly the force feedback transducer is part of the forward path. It's not part of the feedback anymore, so it doesn't determine the response. So the other thing I should note here is that those force feedback transducers are typically magnets with coils wound around them, and the magnet strength and the coil resistance can both be temperature dependent. So for me, knowing this, I'm proposing to only try to do absolute calibration at mid-band in the field. And really focus on this one otherwise unmeasurable by electrical calibration parameter, the force feedback transducer. So the method consists of 4 steps. First, we do an absolute calibration in the field of an accelerodgraph using gravity. This actually just takes a few minutes. Second, we immediately do a side-by-side calibration with a weak motion seismometer. This can take a few hours or many hours depending on the ambient noise and the desired accuracy. Third, we do an electrical calibration of the accelerometer and seismometer. And fourth is we combine all the results and add up the sources of errors. So most of the slides that follow focus on those first 2 steps. Absolute accelerometer calibration works by taking readings right side up. Whoops. and upside down and taking the difference. The main requirement is a 6-sided box jig, which facilitates accurate placement. It's shown in the picture on the right in an upside down position. The even trickier position is the one where the cables are pointing down and you have to stand it upright without interfering with those cables. The instrument has to have a clip level of at least 2 Gs, and we place the sensor on all 6 sides to get 3 sensitivities. The picture shows a leveling plate, which is not required if you have a flat, level surface. And the whole process takes a few seconds per side and a minute total. So we did that for a bunch of, over a couple of days in spring in Canada, where the temperature varied by 20 degrees or 30 degrees. And the accelerometer itself has, not surprisingly, a fairly strong temperature sensitivity. Furthermore, while the instrument is heating or cooling, the errors are larger, so that tells us that it's important to let the temperature stabilize before doing this test. To convert the readings to a sensitivity, you need an estimate of the local gravity in meters per second squared. We found a model called GGM+. It stands for Global Gravity Model Plus. It accounts for both the ellipsoidal shape of the Earth and topography. It uses GRACE satellite gravimetry data and shuttle radar topography mission topography. On the right actually is a simple histogram of that data. You can see that it varies by about 0.15% to minus 0.35% relative to the standard value of G. If we didn't account for this, it would bias our calibration. This model is huge though, like 27 gigabytes. So we resampled it at a coarser grid, and we checked what the error was after our resampling, and it's quite small, many 0.05 of a percent. So we've developed a tool that facilitates this calibration process and uses the regridded gravity data and produces a station XML file. The whole process takes under 2 minutes. Is this working? Can you advance it? It's not working for me. Thank you. So next we do our side-by-side tests. We monitor the temperature of the sensors throughout the test and keep the data at the end where the temperature is stable to within some tolerance. This shouldn't matter for a sensor that is already in the field, but it will matter for the reference sensor, especially if you just pulled it out of the trunk. At this point, there are many ways to process the data. What we do is remove the response and bandpass and do a linearly squares on the 3-component time series. Can you advance, please? The first consideration in side-by-side testing is what's the signal-to-noise ratio, or SNR. The 2 graphs in this slide came out of an earlier work term with Callum, where we surveyed the Canadian National Seismograph Network and Earthquake Early Warning Network for misalignment and timing errors. Both of these plots have as the x-axis the duration times the SNR. On the left is the relative timing error expected, and on the right, the relative misalignment. What we did was take a high-fidelity broadband signal and degrade them with random amounts of white noise and analyze signals of random duration. So on the right, you can, for any desired level of accuracy, you can pick off the required duration times peak SNR to get the estimated 95th percentile error. So for example, to obtain a 0.1% error, you need 9 hours at 25 dB or 2 hours of 37 dB signal-to-noise ratio. Can you advance, please? So you can do a shorter test with low-noise sensors. On the right is a typical probabilistic power spectral density plot for a Titan accelerometer in 2G mode, and we have about 25 dB of SNR, which means we'll take 8 or 9 hours to get 0.1% accuracy. But the Titan has a nice feature. You can change its clip level, and if you reduce the clip level to quarter G, the noise floor is 12 dB lower, and the test need only can be 4 times shorter. So to make sure that this is okay, we actually did some checks, did some calibrations of the accelerometer using different full-scale modes, and found that they agreed to within 0.01%. So we're confident that you can change the gain setting on the accelerometer in the middle of a test, or between tests, between step 1 and step 2. I'm going to quickly get through this. The electrical calibration, I'm glossing over it a little bit, but I will note that there's a slight difference in the response of an accelerometer between DC and 0.2 hertz, which needs to be accounted for. So the next sequence of slides has a look at, is an accounting of the errors. Oh, I'm sorry, can you advance? Thank you. That's the response. On the left is the Titan SMA, on the right is the Trillium seismometer. And advance again, please. So here's what our error budget looks like if we don't account for temperature and don't account for local gravity, just use the standard value for G. The total error RMS is almost 1%. So we do, advance please. If we first account for temperature, we're doing much better. The total RMS error is 0.2%. And advance, please. If we then account for the local value of gravity, the total RMS error is approximately 0.2%, which is looking pretty good. But the wild card here, advance please. The wild card here, oh, one more click. Oh darn, okay, sorry, back please. I'm just going to highlight the noise error entry on this slide at 0.06%. That's assuming a fairly high signal-to-noise ratio and a fairly long duration test. At the Canadian Hazards Information Service, the pressure is really on the field installation engineers, and if we're doing this opportunistically because, say, they're changing a cell modem at the site, they're not going to want to spend more than a few hours at the site. So this is the question: is what's the noise level, the ambient noise level at the particular site, and how long do we actually have to deploy a side-by-side test there? So that's really the controlling number in the error budget once we deal with temperature and local gravity. Advance, please. So in summary, field calibration of strong motion accelerometers can greatly simplify the field calibration of weak motion seismometers. I should note that it can't replace lab calibration, especially for verification that the calibration input and ground motion output responses are as the manufacturer specifies. Also, I want to note that as far as I can tell, neither GRACE nor the GGM Plus model have been calibrated in or verified in any traceable way. But still, I feel pretty strongly that gravity itself can serve as an important reference signal in the field for the calibration of weak motion seismometers. At the National Data Center, the next steps are training our field operations staff. That started, but we haven't actually started taking advantage of field maintenance to do opportunistic calibration of CNSN stations. We do hope to, and I personally am looking for opportunities to compare our calibration results and method to laboratory calibrations that some of you may be involved in. So thank you for your time.
Okay. Okay, we have time for a few questions. So does anyone have anything to ask Nick?
So if you had accelerometers at each of the sites as well as the broadband high gain system, and you compared your carry it around accelerometer with the accelerometer, would you need to use as long of a time series in order to make sure that the local accelerometer was calibrated correctly? And then you could use the local accelerometer, which is sitting there all the time at the same temperature as the broadband, and do the calibration for the broadband?
That's an excellent question. It very much depends what the noise floor is of the instrument, the accelerometer is that's already deployed. How good is the signal-to-noise ratio that you're getting at that site? If you're getting 20 or 30 dBs daily, then absolutely. If you aren't, then no, you need an accelerometer that can both see 2Gs and see a lower, at a lower clip level, give you a lower noise floor and more signal-to-noise ratio. But you're right, the test could be sped up by the introduction of an intermediate standard, and that intermediate standard could even be a weak motion sensor.
Thanks, Nick. That's a really interesting approach to having some in situ traceability for an accelerometer. I'm just kind of noting your discussion about the main applicability for the mid-band frequencies. Curious if you have any thoughts on approaches that could be extended to extend a traceability on an accelerometer more broadband, especially be able to look at the corner frequencies where strange things happen.
The method as proposed, no. I'm really relying on ambient noise, and that's what locks me into mid-band. I just don't think there's, you could generate higher seismic noise with some sort of thumper device at the site, but I worry about its propagation, and whether it's near field, far field, is it a plane wave? I feel like that introduces all sorts of problems. And the reason I'm focusing on mid-band is because if you can pin down the absolute sensitivity of the sensor at just one frequency, anywhere at all, then you're solving this problem of the part of the instrument response that's unreachable through electrical calibration. I personally think electrical calibration is the way to monitor high frequency and low frequency, the two corners, all the way up to Nyquist in the field. It's easy to do. You can do it many times. It's cheap. That's the way to cover the full frequency band. So then you just need to pin the response at one frequency somewhere in the middle. And guess what? The microseismic peak gives us signal to noise in such a way that we can do that.
Thank you.
There's another question from...
Okay, I have a question too. Maybe before you make the calibration, maybe you have a geological study to try to determine the slides of the ground or something like that to make the calibration on the field? When you try to do for the accelerometer sensor?
Are you talking about the absolute calibration of the accelerometer or the side-by-side calibration?
Okay, thanks. It's for the accelerometer calibration.
Yeah, I don't think it matters very much what the surface is. You can do it anywhere. We took care to make sure that the jig for calibrating the accelerometer was level, but it's relatively insensitive even to a few degrees of tilt. It's a 1 minus cos theta sort of thing, and it's not a very significant effect. So if there's some, say, localized tilt during the test, I don't even think it would be very sensitive to that.
Thank you. We have time for one more question. Thomas, please.
Yes, thank you. It was very interesting presentation. I'm just not sure whether I missed something or maybe I'm too picky as being a metrologist, but the method for the calibration of the accelerometer relies on the hypothesis that the temperature has no influence on the response function over frequency. So you're measuring or doing the transfer between the two sensors at a frequency, so not at DC, but your traceable calibration, traceable to G local, calibration of the accelerometer is only at a DC kind of calibration. Or are you rotating it in gravity to get to the same frequency where you do the transfer?
I'm going to answer the temperature part of your question at the beginning, if I understood correctly. I might have to get you to ask again, but in principle anyway, all the steps can be done at the same temperature. Interestingly, the accelerometer that you field calibrate doesn't even need to be at the same temperature as the sensor could be downhole, for example. It just needs to be at a stable sensor, a stable temperature, and at the place where you're doing the side-by-side calibration, so that you're capturing the mid-band sensitivity at the moment of the side-by-side test, the absolute mid-band sensitivity.
But your reference you're tracing to is a DC calibration at G local, right?
But you can do the calibration in the field. So you can do the electrical calibration at the operating, for the field sensor, it's operating at that temperature, and you can do the full frequency band calibration. And then for the accelerometer, you can do the calibration at that time as well. So I feel like it's all sorted out in the field, potentially. Thank you. It's a great question.
Okay, thank you very much, Nick.